Broadcasting across California, you're watching The Issue Is.
And welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Alex Michelson. In the House with us this week is Congresswoman Katie Porter, candidate for the U.S. Senate. This is the first time that I've seen you in person since this. We want to show some video of your now very famous minivan, which was famous before the last few weeks, but is now even more famous because of your new book. Let's show the cover of that. It is called I Swear Politics is Messier Than My Minivan. Katie Porter, welcome back to The Issue Is, and congrats on the new book.
Thank you. And as you can attest, the minivan actually is pretty messy.
It is a little messy, and this book's a little messy, which is what also makes it fun. And even if you disagree with you, I got to say, what's enjoyable about this book is that it is so honest, because most of the political books are so not honest. And you're very blunt about a lot of things, including how much aspects of Congress don't work well, how bad it is for working moms, how frustrating it can be in terms of travel. Why do you want to stay there? Why do you want to sign up for 6 more years in the Senate?
Well, one of the things I say in the book is that while the job, by most of the metrics that we would measure a job by, things like commute times or whether you like your colleagues, this is a pretty tough job. But the work that you get to do, learning from people in California, touring amazing businesses, seeing how nonprofits are solving problems, you get to work with incredibly smart people who care about the country and about Californians. So the job aspects of it, you know, the job security, the commute time, that stuff's pretty rough, but the work is the most amazing, important work I've ever had the chance to do.
And we're going to talk more about the book and about that work in a second, but we want to get to some of the news of the week first. You were the first to announce a run in this race. At the time, Dianne Feinstein hadn't said whether she would run again or not. She's not going to run in 2024, but there's some questions about whether she should leave now. Ro Khanna, who is a congressperson for Silicon Valley, said she's missing votes for shingles. She hasn't been there in months, and it's time for her to go.
I don't know any other job where if you're unable to fulfill your duties, you can continue to have the position.
Some are coming to Senator Feinstein's defense, including former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
It's interesting to me. I don't know what political agendas are at work that are going after Senator Feinstein in that way. I've never seen them go after a man who was sick in the Senate in that way.
So, what do you think? Who is right? Is it time for Senator Feinstein to step aside?
Well, I think that's a decision that Senator Feinstein is going to make. And one of the reasons that I announced my campaign was out of respect for her. I'm not going to run a whisper campaign. I'm not going to say things, behind her back. I respect her work. She's a trailblazer. She made a path for people like me to follow in. But this is a decision that she needs to make. And I think Majority Leader Schumer needs to make a decision about how best to let the committee and the Senate keep doing its work while Senator Feinstein makes her decision.
If she were to step aside, it would be up to Governor Newsom to appoint a replacement. He has said that he would pick an African-American woman. Do you think he should do that? And do you think he should pick Barbara Lee? Well,
I think politicians should keep their promises. And so that's the promise that Governor Newsom made. I have every expectation that he will keep his word. I think that's something we should, as voters, should expect our politicians to do. But I think this campaign will continue regardless of what decision and the timing of Senator Feinstein. I'm going to continue running, and because I think it's important that Californians get to make their own decision here. We've had a number of statewide appointments, as you know, Senator Padilla, Attorney General Bonta, Secretary of State Weber, all appointed by Governor Newsom. So I think this is a race about Californians and about what they want for the state's future.
So you're saying even if he appoints Barbara Lee as the senator, you will continue to run against her. Do you think he should avoid doing that, though? Not pick somebody who's currently in the race, pick a caretaker and let voters decide?
Well, this is ultimately, unfortunately for me, not a decision that I have to make.
Right.
Because my decision is made, which is I think the Senate needs to have its toughest warriors. I think California needs a fighter for California, and I think they need someone who is rooted right here in California, who makes that commute back and forth, is raising their family here, and understands not just California's past, but the challenges facing us for the future.
Let's talk a little bit as well about another big news story this week when it comes to abortion. The Supreme Court deciding at the end of the week to essentially put on hold this decision which would restrict mifepristone, which is a pill that a lot of folks use to actually perform an abortion. What do you make of what the court is doing, and what more do you think needs to be done in terms of Congress?
Well, there's definitely a lot of confusion out there regarding the court's decision and then the stay that just came out from the Supreme Court. So I think the most important thing for people to know is that as things currently stand, medication abortion remains available in states that do not have abortion restrictions. But I think what we're seeing is a lot of concern about, is this a path? What path are we going down here? And I think we're a country that should respect people's freedom. And that is the freedom to make whatever decision they believe is right for them with regard to continuing a pregnancy or terminating it. And so I think the Supreme Court here has, in staying the decision, has done the right thing. Where this decision ultimately goes, I don't know. And I do think Congress should act. I think Congress should protect the right to an abortion at the federal level so that every person, no matter where they live in this country, has the right to make their own decision.
Let's talk a little bit about the Senate race itself. We got fundraising numbers recently. It showed Adam Schiff was ahead of you, but we also know that he is accepting lobbyist money. You have said that you are not accepting lobbyist money. Here's what Adam Schiff said to me about that last week on The Issue Is.
What about lobbyists?
We haven't written off all individuals. We consulted with End Citizens United, which is sort of the gold standard. We're abiding by their requirements. But of course, there are people who represent teachers and represent cafeteria workers and others. We don't want to exclude them.
Does he have a point about that? What do you think about that?
I'm not aware of any high-powered lobbyists that represent cafeteria workers. I think the point of not taking the federal lobbyist money is this. I think you cannot credibly get people to believe that when you take a check and you have your hand out for a check at a reception the evening before, your glass of wine in one hand and a lobbyist check in the other, that the next morning that you vote purely in the interest of what you think is best. So for me, this is about, and I've made this decision several years ago, it is about trying to earn people's trust, trying to show them that we don't work for lobbyists, we don't work for corporations, we work for them. And I've never taken a cent of corporate PAC money, and I'm the only candidate in this Senate race who can say that.
And he is not taking it for this race, but he has taken it for previous races, Adam Schiff.
Yes, in prior decades.
Something else we talked about, when I asked Adam Schiff in terms of the big differences between you, he basically said, that you guys agree on most policy issues, but he could be more effective at getting those policies passed because he's essentially better at building a coalition. We want to put up a list of some of the folks who have endorsed him. He says this is about half of the Democratic caucus in the House. These are folks that work with both of you, and they are now backing him. Should we be concerned about your ability to potentially build a coalition and to play nice with others to get stuff done in the Senate?
Well, this race is not about what longtime Washington insiders want. It's about what California voters want. And so many of these folks served with Adam Schiff 30 years ago in the Assembly. Many of them have served with him for 25, 20 years in Congress. They're right. They have longer relationships with Adam. I'm newer to Congress, and I think that is a strength in this race because I'm closer to what it's really like to be a Californian and wonder, why are Californians' representatives not delivering for our state? So when I look at my track record, I've been there 4 years, and in those 4 years, I have had 7 pieces of legislation passed into law, including very important things like making sure that polluters pay a fair rate when they drill on federal lands, making sure that we're enforcing mental health laws that give access to people, making sure that pharmacy companies, big pharma, is not gouging us. So I'm tremendously proud, and I think I have terrific relationships with my colleagues.
There was one thing in the book that I thought was especially interesting. It was referencing former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. You put up a picture of yourself as a young kid. We want to put this up on the screen. And this is what you said there. I don't want to, you can't make me, oh, okay, I have to go to my room. And you said that this sort of illustrates your relationship with Nancy Pelosi. What do you mean by that, and what is the nature of your relationship with her?
Yeah, I mean, I think Speaker Pelosi is a tremendous leader, and that's why I'm saying sometimes I think people have impulses, especially when you're new to Congress or when you're learning about things, or if you come out of a different background and a different life experience. And so, you know, I think she is very good. People say, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. And Speaker Pelosi is incredibly effective at getting us all to agree on a course of action. And that's sort of the, oh, I have to go to my room. Like, you really, you know, she's very, very effective at her job. And that's why she was a fabulous leader for California.
Did that suggest that sometimes you'd butt heads with the Speaker?
Well, of course, sometimes I butt heads with the Speaker because I went to Washington to fight for Californians, not to do what the Speaker always wants. And there are times, most of the time, when I think the Speaker is doing right by California. But when I think she's not, then it's my job to push her, because that's where I owe my loyalty.
We want to do something called the 4 questions. This has nothing to do with Passover. This is questions I'm asking all of you guys running for Senate. Quick answer, sort of one word, first thing that comes to mind. Okay, here we go. What do you think is the biggest domestic issue?
Housing, the cost of housing.
What is the biggest foreign policy issue?
I think restoring our credibility globally after Donald Trump and rebuilding our diplomatic alliances.
What is the Senate committee that you would most want to serve on?
Oh, I think the Senate Finance Committee, because I think so much of our policy goes through the taxation system.
And this one, I think, is an easy one. Who is the modern senator that you most admire or respect?
Oh, well, that's a shocker. I'm going to say Elizabeth Warren. I mean, I named my daughter Elizabeth after her. So we have a longstanding and warm relationship. And I think she's taught me a lot about the importance of the fight is not just to get to Washington. And I certainly had tough fights in Orange County to get there. But the fights continue in Washington to stand up to corporate special interests. I think part of loving an institution, part of my passion for democracy, is understanding that it works when we make demands on it.
Right. Coming up, how the views of this candidate for the Senate from California were shaped by growing up in Iowa. We are talking to Katie Porter, who is the author of this book right here, I Swear Politics is Messier Than My Minivan. You talk in the book about growing up in Iowa, which I imagine is very different than your kids growing up in Irvine.
Definitely.
How Iowa shaped your worldview and maybe compare that to what your kids are going through now?
Yeah. I think one of the things about growing up in Iowa is I grew up there in the 1980s during the farm crisis. And so Iowa was, the first in the nation for the presidential caucuses. All these politicians wanted to talk to us, told us how important we were. But when the farm crisis hit, when the bank in my small town closed, where were the politicians? Where were all those folks who'd wanted our votes when we needed help saving our economy, saving our community, saving our way of life? And they were nowhere to be found. And so I think this is part of why I'm so dedicated to oversight, why I'm so dedicated to making sure that when government promises something, that it's not just about the press conference. It's not just about the politicians taking a victory lap. It is about making sure that people's lives really change.
Let's talk also about being a single mom. You are the only single mom with school-age kids in Congress. And you write a lot about the fact that the system is not set up for somebody like you at all. And there were a lot of people that were dismissive of you, basically saying, this isn't for you. What do you think needs to change so that the system is better for somebody like you?
Well, just like in a lot of workplaces where we've seen that when you make it possible for people to take care of their personal responsibilities and their family responsibilities, they work harder. And that means making sure that we have a schedule that lets people get to Washington on time and work really hard while they're there, but get back to take care of their constituents, not just their children.
Right.
But I often say I have, 700,000 constituents, and my 3 children are the most demanding of them.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your kids. You say that your most treasured possession of all your time in Washington is this picture, which is of your son introducing you at your election night. What a great picture that is. I'm curious, what have your kids taught you?
Oh, well, they definitely reinforced to me that accountability is a two-way street. And I think voters reinforce that every 2 years, but I would say my kids reinforce that pretty much every 2 hours. And so, they recently started, I was very busy in Washington. I didn't make it to the grocery store because I had to turn right around that weekend and go home. And my kids started calling it the Great Famine because there was an inadequate supply of Cinnamon Toast Crunch for breakfast. So I think they definitely deliver accountability. But I also think that, they're very, very good at wanting me to explain things. They want to know why I'm taking these votes. They have a lot of the same questions on their minds that I think voters do.
One of the things you talk about in here, which it's got to be difficult to talk about, but very real, is this idea that you were a domestic abuse victim. It's part of the reason you are a single mother at this point. 1 in 3 women are domestic abuse victims. And I think it's really meaningful for a lot of people to sometimes hear other people share their stories so that they feel validated. What can you tell us about that and how that shaped your view?
Yeah, for me, this was a deeply personal experience. It was for my ex-husband and for the children. And one of the things I talk about in the book is how painful and really difficult it was to have this be made into a political issue in the last Democratic primary I faced. And, I think it's going to happen again, unfortunately, in this Democratic primary. And the effect of this could mean that more people who've gone through these kinds of personal and painful experiences stay away from politics, when in fact, we need people who have these experiences fighting for good policies with regard to curbing and preventing domestic violence. So I think the unfortunate effect of having these things politicized rather than leaving them as personal is you actually end up silencing the very people whose voices we most need to hear.
And on that front, because has been some reporting about that or questions about you and anger management. What do you want to say about that?
Well, these allegations only ever seem to come up when I'm running against other Democrats, and that makes me really disappointed. My ex-husband and I have parted ways. That was almost 10 years ago now, I guess 10 years ago. And he lives out of state. He would like to go about his life. I would like to go about mine. This is all really painful for my children. And when we are trying to have more women in politics, when we're trying to have more diversity in Congress, when people see these kinds of nasty allegations and unfair allegations made, it just pushes people out of Washington. And then it's a vicious cycle because people say people in politics don't have the same experiences we have. So I think, unfortunately, having false allegations made against you by an abuser is actually altogether too common in our system.
When we come back, what's the best way to be heard by your Congress member if you're not a lobbyist? We are talking to Katie Porter, the author of I Swear, Politics is Messier Than My Minivan. In this book, you talk about your communications consultant, whose name is Nathan Click, who's been here on the show. We've got some video of Nathan, and I love the phrase that you used about him. You say he has the happy temperament of a golden retriever and the killer instinct of a Rottweiler. So what is sort of your big takeaway from him in terms of media relations? And do you think you're following that today?
I don't know. I'm sure he'll tell me later. I'm sure there'll be both a happily worded yet very killer instinct analysis message waiting for me when I finish the show. But I think one of the things Nathan really drove home for me is when I wrote my very first stump speech with Nathan. We were sitting in a cafe and we wrote this stump speech, and it was all about standing up to big corporations, about making sure that consumers didn't get cheated, about making sure that employees didn't get their wages stolen, making sure that taxpayers didn't have their tax dollars abused or fraud. I said to Nathan, well, I think this is a great speech. I wrote it with you, but isn't everybody going to say this same thing? And he laughed and he said, oh, you're so new to politics. Like, actually, there are a lot of people who spend their time in politics currying favor with corporations, afraid of standing up to corporate power because they won't get those corporate PAC checks and that corporate money. And so he was like, I think one of the things he drove home to me is actually that fighting for everyday people, fighting for workers, fighting for consumers, fighting for seniors, for taxpayers, actually isn't the norm in Washington.
So you just turned that question into a way to get back to talking points. So I think he would be proud.
I think he would be proud.
You just did that. Another thing you talk about here, there's a lot of lists of things that you can do, including what I thought was especially interesting. If you want to reach out to your Congress member and get a meeting and actually be heard, and you're not a lobbyist and you don't got all this money, you say there's some simple steps, including try to talk to them here in California.
Yep, absolutely. So when we're in Washington, we are at the whims of the voting schedule. And we don't necessarily know what time votes will be called. We don't know whether hearings will go long or short. Whereas when I'm in California every week, I have control over that calendar. And so very often when people are trying to meet with us in D.C., we have to apologize. We're 10 minutes late. We have to go. Votes were just called. I can spend more time with you. I can meet more people. So think about a CEO who might come with a lobbyist to meet with me in Washington versus the experience I had today, for example, touring an entire factory, seeing their technology at work, seeing all of their employees and the pride they have in their job. And so I think it's much better for always to have us come to you, because then we can see the context and meet 100 people, not one or two. And
you're now going through the process, speaking of that, of touring the state and going to different places throughout the state. As you do that, what do you think is sort of the biggest difference between you and your competitors that people should think about?
Well, I think for me, it's really that standing up to corporate interests. It's the no corporate corporate PAC money. It's also the fact that I've run tough races. I was the highest performing Democrat in my area this last race, and so I've shown that I have an ability to bridge some of the partisan divides. I can reach out and win no-party preference independent voters. I can win Republican voters on occasion, and that's something I'm proud of. And I think we're tired of the politics of division. We're tired of people blaming the other party rather than being willing to hold themselves and the institution accountable, and I think I'm different in that regard.
Still to come, Porter plays personal issues, minivan edition. We are with Katie Porter here on The Issue Is. We're going to end with something fun. We play a game on this show, which you've played before, which is called Personal Issues, which is our 30-second game. But we're going to do it minivan inspired, right? So we see the minivan. We know the minivan's part of the I swear politics is messier than my minivan. So for this 30-second round, it's going to be, imagine we're taking a road trip in the minivan, right? We're packing the kids, we're going on the road, and first thing that comes to mind. Here we go. What is the best road trip song?
I think Willie Nelson, Always Good.
Okay. Best road trip snack?
Oh. I don't know if I have a best. I have a worst.
What's that?
Which my kids and I eat is Cheetos is the worst.
Okay.
Because they lick their fingers and then I find orange smudges all over the van.
What's the go-to food stop? Is there anywhere you got to stop?
My kids would say In-N-Out for sure.
Okay. Best tourist attraction in California?
Oh, best? I mean, I live right near some of the most beautiful beaches in California, but I don't think about those as tourist spots. I think about them as home.
Right.
I would say our national parks. We have the most national parks in the country, and they're really amazing.
And lastly, if you go on the road trip, who's the kid that's going to behave the best?
Oh, Paul, my middle child. Just because he's very happy-go-lucky, but he just kind of goes with the flow, and that's important on a road trip. But we're planning a road trip this summer around California, getting out to see parts of the state. So my kids are disappointed I'm not going to have a big, fancy campaign bus like Governor Newsom or like Senator Harris. We're going to do it in the minivan.
All right, that'll be fun. I hope we can join you for some of that, and maybe we can play Willie Nelson on the road again.
Absolutely.
All right, Congresswoman, thanks so much. Again, the book is available in stores everywhere now, and it can help pay for her fixing of her toilet, right? What she wrote in there. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Best of luck out on the campaign trail. Thanks for watching The Issue Is. We'll see you next week. Great job.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you so much. That was really, really fun.
Nicely done.
I'm glad you enjoyed the book.